So today you're going to hear about how Sabre migrated their applications and data centers to Google Cloud with both speed and ease. It's such a compelling story, and we hope you can take lessons learned from their migrations to your own migrations to Google Cloud. My name is Heather Remek, and I'm the global head of the Rapid Migration Program, or RAMP for short, here at Google Cloud. And I'm going to kick off the session with an overview of the RAMP program. We'll then transition to a fireside chat with Joe DiFonzo, the CIO of Sabre, and Stephen Orban, the VP of Migrations here at Google Cloud. And then finally, we'll close it out with a live Q&A session. So the RAMP program unifies our migration approaches, tools, frameworks, and teams on a unified and scalable global program. And it's designed to give customers and partners everything they need to evaluate and execute large-scale migrations to Google Cloud, including how to assess people, process, and technology readiness. In building the RAMP program, we've taken key learnings from over a decade of migrations, both successful and some not so successful, and streamlined the best practices and approaches under this unified migration program, making it even more comprehensive than before. We're also working closely with our partner ecosystem to onboard them to the RAMP program, including utilizing the RAMP governance mechanisms we've put in place to complement their existing delivery models to help ensure migrations start and end healthy. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. There we go. Okay, in our experience from helping hundreds of customers through their migrations, we've also learned there's an opportunity to help customers build a flywheel effect within their organization. First, we or our partners help customers quantify a business case and drive consistent stakeholder alignment. We then help them set up Cloud Foundation and a RAMP plan that identifies and prioritizes the workloads to migrate. Following this preparation and planning stage, we help them migrate, validate, and sunset the old, which is a very critical step, so that customers can start to realize the efficiencies of moving to the cloud. And lastly, we help them implement transformational operating models so they can continuously optimize what's been moved. Done right, the learnings and experiences gained from migrating workloads compound over time to help refine the business case, bolster the foundation, accelerate subsequent migrations, and make it easier to optimize workloads. And to create this flywheel effect, we've anchored RAMP on 5 key best practices. And we tend to see these best practices in customers who are successfully pulling off large migrations. And we found that if any of these best practices are missing or deficient, the migration will either stall or fail completely. Now, the first best practice is having a business case and having executives aligned on the business case. This is essential to the success of the migration. And a good business case will have a handful of clearly defined reasons why a migration will benefit the organization, ideally articulating more than just the total cost of ownership improvement. The second is a learning culture. Because moving to the cloud requires different ways of working, teams need to be enabled on both the new technology and the new ways of working. Too often we see high-level executives overlooking this in the beginning, and some feel their teams will just get the migration done because they're told to do so. But from our experience, it doesn't usually work that way. Teams need to be enabled on how they will work in the cloud. And there's no doubt you already have amazing teams across your organization. So utilizing your existing talent who have a wealth of institutional knowledge about your company and your culture will help you be successful in the cloud. And to enable and drive these learnings, the third is a cloud center of excellence, or cloud team, or whatever you want to call the team. But this team should include a diverse background of roles, and the team should own and manage the landing zone, and should harvest and disseminate the best practices as the organization's cloud capabilities mature. For example, when I was a leader of the cloud team at Verizon, not only were we responsible for building out a hardened enterprise-ready platform, we were also responsible for building and driving cloud adoption. Our cloud team included folks from network security, governance, automation, and collectively we ran a weekly community of practice call to take the angst out of moving to the cloud by sharing best practices, new automations, and shared learnings from across the organization. This was critical to our success in driving cloud adoption across the enterprise. I keep hitting the wrong button. Thank you. The next is OKRs, which is one of my favorite. OKRs, objectives and key results. It's one of my favorites because I think it differentiates us from others. We are very intentional about OKRs and believe they're instrumental to a healthy migration. Monitoring and managing a great OKR that outlines in detail what you're trying to achieve, for what purpose, by when, and who will own it can make a significant difference to a healthy migration. Even if some dates are missed, having a line in the sand that everyone, us, you, the partner, agrees with has almost magical alignment properties and provides clarity for everyone to march towards it. And having it written down and constantly measuring the progress also makes it really easy to include in shareholder calls, all hands, and town halls, so the executive team can keep a steady pulse on how the organization is pressing towards their stated goals. And the best practices, and the last best practice is having strong program governance throughout the migration. There should be a business review, steering committee, and weekly checkpoints. Two mechanisms that we put in place as part of the RAMP program are the RAMP migration deck and the RAMP health check. The migration deck is a single source of truth to track and manage the overall strategy, health, and progress of a migration. And this new way of managing migrations will help teams, as well as Google and partner teams, align on strategy and delivery, and it provides better early warning signs to help detect and mitigate problems before they impact your migration. We currently run health checks for RAMP accounts to help teams unblock issues and to ensure both the partner and account teams have all the support they need to be successful. We highly recommend you utilize these mechanisms to hold weekly migration checks with your account team and partner teams. Now, while we certainly can't claim that having a strong business case and executive alignment, creating a learning culture, harvesting learnings through a cloud center of excellence, having clearly defined OKRs, and implementing strong program governance will guarantee a successful program and migration. We can say that we've seen enough migrations that are missing one or more of these best practices either stall or fail completely. So as you're working with your Google and partner teams, lean on them to help you implement these best practices in your migration sooner rather than later. Now, Google has a lot of capabilities to help customers migrate. We've got several tools, and we've got various programs to assess readiness, partners to help, investments we can make, but we didn't have something that brought them all together to help our customers and partners consistently land each of the best practices I just outlined. So we're bringing all these capabilities together, creating new ones when we need to, and wrapping it all inside our rapid migration program. We're doing this through governance, where we're enabling our account and partner teams on RAMP-specific mechanisms to help drive a consistent governance model that provides a predictable view across a migration. All RAMP migration engagements utilize the migration deck and participate in health checks, and we're enabling delivery teams to do the same with our customers. We're also building out a library of first and third-party tools to aid in all phases of migration use cases and working on frameworks for our third-party tools to be ready to go when we need them. And we're curating a partner ecosystem based on a bar we set where we're constantly monitoring to ensure our partners and our delivery migrations in a way that's consistent with what we know works best. We're also working through a more robust incentive program to help customers deal with the double bubble as you migrate workloads to Google Cloud. Now, there are 3 key phases to a successful migration. The first is assessment, which looks at your environment to understand what's in it and how things could move to build a RAMP plan. And most importantly, it takes a cross-functional view across business, operations, technology, finance, security, and compliance, so we can plan on training the right people, help you get your cloud team set up, start thinking about OKRs, and making sure your stakeholders are aligned. We recommend overly exhaustive assessments, which can take up to 6 months or more, as the business case can be increased in fidelity during the second phase. Now, the second phase is the foundation build phase. where the landing zone and the CCOE are built, are established, and workloads are moved. We believe in a mental model of customers learning by doing, so we want to avoid landing zone build-outs that take 12 months or more and are theoretical in practice because no applications are actually deployed against it. We encourage our customers to set a goal of migrating 30 apps in 30 days. Sounds like a lot, but it's not. To ensure they're driving the change management needed to become a cloud-first IT operation. And in the third phase, we work with our customers to migrate in waves with strong program governance over the duration of the migration. A well-run migration creates the flywheel effect, where learnings and experiences gained from migrating workloads compound to refine the business case, bolster the foundation, accelerate subsequent migrations, and make it easier to optimize workloads over time. You need to be truly using the cloud to take advantages of the transformational and cost savings capabilities it provides. This is the outcome Ramp is ultimately trying to achieve. We know from experience how challenging the initial phases of a migration can be. So I want to share a little bit about our new assessment capability. We are pleased to announce the Cloud Capability Assessment for Ramp as the first step to build an outcome-driven migration strategy. The online assessment determines where you are in your migration journey and identifies tangible actions across business, operational, and technology areas that drive successful migrations to Google Cloud. We're also providing a comprehensive playbook on how to execute Ramp assessments that will help drive tangible outcomes and set your organization up for success for cloud foundations. And partners can leverage the playbook to drive business and technical discovery workshops and run specific tooling to identify prioritized workloads that can be moved to Google Cloud. Now, good processes and governance are critical to a migration, and so are the tools you'll use to plan and migrate your workloads. Within the tooling arm of Ramp, we have a first-party service integrated into the console called Migration Center, which provides one place for you to access tools, best practices, and data-driven prescriptive guidance to guide you through business case development, environment discovery, workload mapping, migration planning, financial analysis, foundation setup, and migration execution. With Migration Center, you have full control of your data and who can access it. And Migration Center complies with Google's security and privacy policies. And best of all, it's free to use. Now, no matter how large your organization, no one wants to go through a modernization alone. And a successful cloud migration is a group effort leveraging experts across disciplines. As part of Ramp, we'll rely solely on partners who have achieved the data center modernization specialists and/or the cloud migration specialists. This is on top of infrastructure specialization and achieving premier service partner status. We are actively working across our partner ecosystems to onboard them to Ramp, including the Ramp mechanisms such as the migration deck and health check. With these trusted partners, you're in great hands, and with Ramp, you'll be able to easily find the partner that is right for you. So as Joe and Stephen make their way to the stage, I want to share a quote from one of our Ramp partners that work closely with Sabre on their migration journey. You'll notice that the key theme is not technology. It's all about the cultural successes, beginning with their openness to new perspectives, adjusting their approaches as they learned, their profound cultural transformation, and their adaptability, agility, and capacity for continuous improvement. Keep these in mind as you listen to Sabre's migration journey. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe and Stephen.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
Appreciate it. As Heather mentioned, my name is Stephen, and I am a recovering CIO. I always wanted to say that in front of a crowd.
I hope to be there someday.
In all seriousness, 10 years ago, I was the CIO, but yeah, 10, 11 years ago, I was the CIO at Dow Jones and led a significant migration. We went from 56 data centers down to 6, reallocated about $100 million in costs from traditional IT operations to product development. And the thing I'm most proud of is we went from just a few software releases a year to hundreds a week by the time I left. And then I spent the last 8 years after that at AWS leading their migration business as well as starting their data exchange and their ISV and marketplace ecosystem before I joined Google last year to help us build the migration discipline that Heather largely just walked through. And if it's one thing that I've learned, it's that a lot of the challenges that customers face with large-scale transformations and migrations are not just technical. As Heather talked about some of these best practices, it's also bringing your people along, creating a learning culture, harvesting the best practices, and really standing up and being a leader to drive change management. I've also had the opportunity in my travels over the last 10 years to work with hundreds, if not more than 1,000 different CIOs and technology leaders as they've driven their transformation. And I'm super lucky today to be joined by Joe DiFonzo, the CIO of Sabre, who, in my opinion, is one of the most forward-thinking leaders and drivers of change agents, if you will, that I've had the opportunity to get to know. And so Joe and I are going to be having a conversation to learn a little bit about Sabre and their journey and some of the opportunities that they had, some of the challenges that arose, and how they overcame them. So Joe, thank you so much for being here with us today. Maybe introduce yourself for a couple minutes beyond what I said, and we'll get started.
Sure, thanks for having me out, Stephen. So again, my name is Joe DiFonzo. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Sabre. If you're not familiar with Sabre, we like to say, we basically make travel happen. We provide the systems that are underneath many airlines and hotels and travel agencies that basically control all of the data that goes around the whole travel ecosystem. And it's a very complex thing. Before I came to Sabre, just a little more than 6 years ago, I was in the telecommunications industry for 27 years. So I thought I knew complexity until I got to the travel ecosystem, and then I learned a lot. So it's a very interesting business. I like to say we were like the first SaaS business ever, dating back to like the 1970s when we first started deploying our technology inside of travel agencies around the world and different airlines. Now, of course, it wasn't the SaaS that you know today because of the technology changes back then. It was a little bit more complicated and a lot more expensive, but we've been evolving with the technology ever since.
Cool. Well, thanks again for being here. So the systems that underpin all of our travel seems pretty important. People want to get to be where they want to go on time. Absolutely.
It's one of those things where, how can I say this? One of my main goals every day when I wake up is please don't end up on CNN. Because, certainly if our systems did have any kinds of major problems, basically brings all the airlines and airports to a dead stop. And it definitely makes the news. So it's something that we don't like to see. And I'm happy to say that, certainly since we've been making our cloud migration, our level of risk around that has definitely dropped for a lot of reasons I could talk about. We started this journey back in 2017, really, when I came into the company and started looking around and, really thought about what kind of business is this company in? When I saw how much energy we were expending operating data centers and networks all around the planet. And it really didn't seem correct to me that we weren't, in this day and age, right, when you have cloud out there, we were not focusing on the problem of our business. We had all of this focus on these base technologies, and quite honestly, there's no way we were going to do those as well as a company like Google could do them. So one of the first things I did when I came in is said, why don't we look at potentially moving this business to the cloud? And of course, everybody screamed and said, that's impossible, we could never. And so it took some convincing, but that's really part of the journey. And kind of have hinted at that with the transition strategies and the things you have to think about in the program. But honestly, when we looked at all of the numbers and we looked at what was to gain actually beyond the numbers, there was no way that we couldn't do this in this day and age. So we got the commitment of our leadership, we got the commitment of our board of directors, and basically embarked on the journey and haven't looked back.
Yeah, so what are some of the things that you needed to do? So you had a business case where, okay, we're going to be able to save some money. Sounds like you're also going to be able to, you knew you were going to be able to add some resiliency into the business and move in this direction. How did you go about having that conversation with the CEO, with the board, and to get all the executives on board?
Yeah, it was rather interesting. We had a lot of legacy technology. It was a company that had grown up over many years and constantly evolving things and growing and acquiring new businesses and that sort of thing. So we had a lot of pockets of different technology all over the place. And quite honestly, we were spending a lot of effort just keeping everything running in a stable way and making sure that everything was fairly secure. But there was a lot of overhead in the way we were running it. So we started this whole thing looking at it from purely a financial perspective. Honestly, one of the little secrets here is that's where you really want to start. And by the way, it was surprising because when I made that assertion that, hey, we can run in the cloud cheaper than we can run in our own data centers, I got a lot of pushback from people on my own team that thought for some reason like we could run a data center cheaper than Google could. I don't understand that, but it's true, right? And it's something that you have to work your way through because people don't really, completely understand the concept of TCO often. And when you really look at all of the labor and all of the effort and all of the supply chain management, all the contract risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, your inability to get, the power of scale, right, in a single architecture, in a single environment, it's hard to see sometimes the value that you're going to drive out of it. But we started with that to say, hey, I think we can save a lot of money. We put that out there, we did the analysis and said, I think we can actually save significant, back to your point with what you did earlier. We've actually taken hundreds of millions of dollars of cost out of our business by doing this, and the cost avoidance was enormous beyond that. I mean, it was incredible if you think about where our business was going, where it was growing, right, and what we were going to be dealing with in the future. So it started there, that got the attention of the board and the leadership, and we engaged. But I have to tell you, myself and a lot of the technologists working with me in the company knew that the real big benefit was going to be at the end of the line when we could really start operating as a cloud-first company, because speed of development, our security of our infrastructure, the automation, right, that gets rid of toil all over the place every day, the stability and standards we could drive across the enterprise brings a value that's really actually hard to measure in dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so making sure you had kind of a clear, solid financial case and getting everybody to resonate with that, and leaning into the fact that at this day and age, a cloud provider is largely going to be able to operate on a much more efficient scale than you are. So when you started the journey with Google, you had a little bit with another cloud provider and a lot on premises, and you ended up making a pretty bold move to work, mostly with Google. How did that transpire, and what sort of factored into your decision to?
Yeah, so when we started, we really started in earnest late 2017, early 2018, and we took the attitude of we don't know what we don't know. And we said, let's keep an open mind to a different, essentially a multi-cloud approach, so that maybe we can get the best benefits from each of the different cloud providers. We went down that path for a little over a year and a half, and what we found was that there was an awful lot of overhead trying to manage all of the different infrastructures, all of the different APIs, all of the different tools, all of the different standards, and basically we were not really seeing a major benefit of that, because maybe 10 years ago it would have been different, but now we're seeing that from a base perspective in terms of can you run your business on it, pretty much all of the major cloud providers could give us everything we needed. So what we actually did was we said, wait a second, do we really need all the overhead of this multi-cloud approach? And for us, it just didn't make sense. And we started talking with our cloud providers and essentially looked for the cloud provider that was the most able to work with us in the way we wanted to work. Sabre is a very engineering-heavy company, and we really resonated with Google on that front. And Google was very interested in working more with us, and basically we felt this kinship, and we were able to make a good deal with Google on this, and we basically made a decade-long commitment to move everything into Google, right? And we're very close to having done that now.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that commitment and the trust that goes along with it. We of course really appreciate that. It wasn't always smooth sailing once we kind of made that commitment to one another and started the migration, and talk to us about some of the obstacles and how we overcame them.
So let's start with the fact that when we announced our agreement in early 2020, literally like within 2 weeks of that announcement, the pandemic struck. Now, as you can imagine, for a company in the travel industry, that's a really big deal because the business just lurched to a halt, right? All the planes stopped flying, people stopped traveling, companies stopped sending people for travel, everybody was afraid, we were all quarantined, et cetera. And it was actually a moment of truth, because at that point, right, we could have maybe backed off and said, let's wait and see what happens. But interestingly, when we kind of took stock in the leadership team of what we needed to do, we decided, no, we have to keep pushing forward on this, because the pandemic will end. The competition's not going to wait for us. We need to plow ahead. So we actually took advantage of that time to continue to move forward. And this, back to Heather's point, this is the time that we did a lot of the upfront foundation work. By the way, which was a big learning from a previous cloud experience, because what we found when we were going down that multi-cloud path is we weren't so organized, and we were actually creating lots of little islands, even within the same cloud, of different ways of approaching and implementing that cloud infrastructure. You think about the network, you think about security, you think about routing, you think about firewalls, you think about even just the way you're deploying your applications and the technologies you're using. We said, we have to not do that, because we could end up with a situation that's not as advantageous as where we wanted. And so we took the time up front to get the foundation right, and then we started building on that. And I really do believe that's what let us move so quickly to the point where basically 3 years after that, we're significantly moved into GCP, and now almost 4 years after that, we're almost done.
Yep, that makes sense. And how did you bring your team along? So we talked a little bit about how you got your executive team on board, and then the pandemic hit, and I can imagine that being a significant a moment of reflection on kind of strategy and what to do. What about like the individuals on your team? And did you have folks who were maybe a little bit more apprehensive than others? And if so, how did you sort of handle it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was different things for different people. Some people really just did not have the experience in any kind of cloud-based infrastructure to have a level of trust and faith that we could make our applications, which are like super high scale and super high availability, work properly in that environment effectively. So there was some learning gap we needed to close there. So one of the things we did was make sure everybody got the training that they needed to come up to speed on GCP and how to use it, and all the other tools we use like Terraform and things like that. Another part of it was just this notion of how much work it was going to be, right, to move the applications in. And a big challenge that I think everybody faces in this when you come in and move things into the cloud for the first time is you're going to make a lot of these decisions about how much time do I spend trying to re-engineer this application so that it's more cloud native versus how much time am I going to spend just trying to get it over the hump, or get it over into the new environment. We made a pretty conscious decision that for the most part, we were going to do minimal re-engineering in order to get into cloud more quickly. And I am positive that that was the right decision, at least for us, because basically the bet we made was that once you get into cloud, it's going to be very easy to cycle quickly and solve the problems. And so in the first iteration of a lot of the deployments of the app, they weren't the most efficient in the cloud. But now that we're in the cloud, we can cycle so much more quickly than we could in the old environment that people, I think, are really surprised. And I think in a lot of ways we're way more efficient, right, than we ever were when we were operating in our legacy data centers.
Yeah, I love that approach. So training your teams, take out that sting of the fear of the uncertain, and make sure they have the right skill sets to.
That was the biggest thing. As a matter of fact, the decision we made was take our biggest application and put it in the cloud first, because that gave us the biggest bang for the buck. And once everybody saw that that could run there, that ended all the conversations about is it possible, right? And it was really, I think, a very good thing. We were lucky in the fact that that application was well suited to this kind of migration, but it was definitely a risk.
So training, Lighthouse Win, making sure you migrate quickly. It's funny, I think. Training is one of the things that's most often overlooked. Heather talked about it a little bit, and it's one of the reasons we emphasize it so heavily in RAMP. And then I also see a lot of analysis paralysis, where customers will get stuck in this, well, we have to modernize everything before we even consider moving it to the cloud. And the reality is that is just going to take a long time.
That's correct.
And you have the cycle time. One of the best anecdotes I've seen or principles I've seen, and we've seen a couple of customers do this now. It's similar to what you're saying, where we have something called the 2-week rule, where every team, once they start to migrate a particular application, they have 2 weeks to finish it. So you can do whatever modernization or cloud native changes that you would like to do, but you have to finish the migration in 2 weeks to sort of keep everybody on point with velocity. So you're a lot further ahead than that now. Now you've not just your biggest application, but dare I say most of your applications have moved?
Yeah, literally.
Talk to me about the
so
metrics.
We've closed 15 data centers now. Our last 2 physical data centers are on the path to closure by the end of this year. And at that point, we will have everything in the cloud, every single thing. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And again, the benefits, everybody sees them. They're pretty obvious now. At this point, I think we have somewhere around 40,000 VMs running in GCE. We have about 60,000 containers running in GKE. We have about 40 petabytes of storage split between block and BigQuery.
Yeah, 15 data centers and a lot of containers. That's a big deal. Congratulations.
It's huge.
Anything before we maybe open it up to questions? You know a lot more now than you did when you started. What would you tell either the audience or your younger self, who maybe some of the folks here who are just getting started, that they should consider? Yeah,
here's what I would say. If you're on the fence, don't be. Dive in, because there's really no excuse anymore. I can tell you that, and I can now give direct experience with Google on this. The capabilities you need are there in the cloud to do whatever you want to do. As a matter of fact, we're doing more advanced things than we could have ever done in our own data centers right now that we moved to GCP. The amount of simplification, standardization, savings in the network, improved security, improved performance, improved reliability. It's just insane, the kinds of things we've been able to do. Zone redundancy, regional redundancy in our applications, using Spanner to move data around. I mean, it's just, we could have never done these things before. So not only has our environment gotten cheaper, it's gotten orders of magnitude better. And so what I'd say is, if you have any doubt, please don't. Please talk to somebody who's been through this, because many companies have now at this point, and I guarantee you will be very glad that you took the plunge.
Well, everybody, time is the most valuable asset we all have, and I know you're all busy. Thank you so much for giving us your time this afternoon. We really appreciate you being here and listening to us this afternoon. Thank you, Heather, for our opening, and enjoy the rest of the show.